Okay, so it's been about 90 days since my last video on Kashmir, and today is Remembrance Day, so here's another personal reflection for you. So the odd thing about Remembrance Day for me is that it suggests war is over, and we've all learnt from the horror and mistakes of the past. The reality, however, is sadly very different. Conflict is a daily lived experience still for so many people in the world. And let's be honest, aside from the fact that it's not us dying, not much has changed. The truth is, even if you try, you also can't just forget about conflict if you've experienced it. It leaves a mark whether you want it to or not. I describe going back to Kashmir like being fixed on hard drugs to my friends. There's something amazing about the high of being back in the motherland and, getting lost in that otherworldly beauty and the amazing feeling of being home, away from home. But the lows are low, and on reflection, the word I'd use to describe travel to the motherland is also traumatic. We've experienced, seen and heard firsthand what happens in conflict. I'd go as far to say that if you imagine the worst kind of violence, it's probably or likely happening in Kashmir. Everything from entire villages getting raped, kids getting abused and killed in the most horrific ways, unspeakable systematic civilian torture, literally everything from body parts being cut off and people being forced to eat them, to burning and electrocution of one's private parts. I quickly learned that there is no limit to the creativity of human cruelty in Kashmir. You'd think this stuff would get reported and that somehow the news would get out if it was that bad, and somewhere, someone would do something, surely. What's the point of having so many human rights organizations and international bodies and all those well-meaning celebrity and social activists if they don't do anything? Well, that was like me too when I was little. Living in an intense military occupation where nearly 1 million army troops who have legal immunity to kill and destroy anything are living right next to you is something you don't forget. I remember experiencing conflict one time, getting caught up in a gun battle that broke out in the streets, and at another time, seeing the aftermath of a blast. Our car was also once, hit by a kind of a stone pelt. But funnily enough, the experience that makes me sick when I remember and play back with precision was the one time my dad lost it and argued with one of the army personnel at what felt like the 20th security check in a half-hour car journey. It was the first time as a child I intimately remember feeling the physicality of fear, and then feeling eternally grateful that we were all British and had an escape card. But what a grim reminder of daily life for locals. Admirably, the locals still protest. The standard army response, incidentally, has been to use guns that have been developed to hunt animals on people. It really says it all, and I find it quite symbolic, really. When the cartridge of these guns explode, pellets up to 500 disperse in all directions at super high velocity. The effect is not just to simply kill people, although that of course happens, but it's more deliberately cruel, a strategy to blind them. And, if we're talking numbers, approximately 3,000 people, they're actually called the Walking Dead of Kashmir. And, the youngest victim was a 19-month-old baby. So people protesting don't have much hope under a military occupation. What about getting the word out? Well, it's not easy when the entire valley is still under a government-imposed lockdown where mobile networks, TV networks, and the internet has been cut off. It's incredible that this is the third month now And, you know, this isn't the first time it's happened in Kashmir. It's crazy that this happens in the 21st century. We can't deal without our phones for a minute. Can you imagine what would that even feel like? No news coming out and no one going in, as international journalists and human rights organizations, you know, don't really get that permission to enter the region. So bear in mind, whenever you see any reporting on Kashmir, it's being done often by local journalists under Indian rule of law. And that, you know, if we think Cambridge Analytica was effective at tracking and manipulating people, the Indian government mass surveillance and propaganda program is depressingly sophisticated. And, you know, I work in marketing. You'd think the Indian public would be outraged by what's happening. But instead, the people are literally in the streets celebrating a slow motion genocide that is effective marketing for you. So I've rambled on a bit. Back to Remembrance Day. Whether we like it or not, the Kashmiri diaspora everywhere carry a huge burden. While we go on with our daily lives, Kashmir never leaves our hearts. I'll be reminded of the motherland at odd moments, you know, during the day. Getting teary, reading Pocahontas to my daughters at bedtime and reflecting on the doomed struggle of my own Indigenous people. Running in the park on fallen autumn leaves. Fireworks at nighttime, which are kicking off in the background. Recalling gunfire when Notre Dame randomly caught fire, and reflecting on the huge reaction across international media and the sense of outrage. The death of my grandfather, my friends talking about holidaying in India, incredible India, any news story about children, the call to prayer. Well, Kashmiris across the world deep down know the hopelessness of the situation in the valley. The one power we have still is the power of our collective memory. So while it's incredibly painful and at times the sadness in the heart overwhelms and takes us to dark places, a stark reminder of how those who can need to pace ourselves with this and take time out when it gets too much. We must also return to that heavy duty and keep remembering, continuing to bear witness when no one else will, restoring our own humanity and hoping and praying that nothing lasts forever, including the suffering of our people. I'd like to end my video by quoting Agha Shahid Ali, one of Kashmir's most famous modern poets, who describes the experience of all Kashmiris so poignantly well when he says, "And I remembered another moment that refers only to itself, a moment when only a lost sea can be heard, a time to recollect every shadow, everything the earth was losing, a time to think of everything the earth and I had lost, and of all that I would lose, of all that I was losing." Thank you. Happy Remembrance Day.